In the heart of South Africa, hidden away, lies a deep hole. Boesman's Gut, or Bushman's Hole as it's referred to in English, is a deep, submerged freshwater cave, which was first explored in 1977 by amateur diver Mike Rathborne, but at this time no one had any idea how deep Bushman's Hole was. In 1981, on his first visit to Bushman's Hole, Nuno Gomes dove to almost 250 foot, dropping down through a narrow chimney that opens up into an enormous chamber. In 1988, he set an African depth record of just over 400 foot, and from that day, the Bushman's reputation as a deep diver's cave started to spread. In 1993, Sheck Exley showed up, supported by a team that included Gomes. Exley became the first diver to hit the bottom, touching down at 863 foot on the hole's sloping floor. During this expedition, Gomes performed a sonar scan of the hole and revealed Bushman's to be the largest freshwater cave ever discovered at the time, with a main chamber that was approximately 770 foot by 250 foot across, and 927 foot at its deepest point. The narrow entrance is claustrophobic, but once you reach the vast main chamber, it's like spacewalking, and for some cave divers it must have been irresistible. But these places of absolute beauty usually always come at a cost. Something that DeAndrea would learn the hard way. 20-year-old DeAndrea grew up in a small town about 35 miles south of Johannesburg and loved adventure in all of its forms. He shot his first buck at the age of 10, and by 17 he was racing a souped-up car around the local tracks, and soon after would find a passion for diving. In 1994, after he had logged about 200 cave dives, Deon had been invited by the South Africa Cave Diving Association to join them on a practice dive at Bushman's Hole. Deon was absolutely thrilled to go, but his mother, 50-year-old Marie, begged Deon not to do the dive. Just the previous year, Bushman's Hole had already taken the life of a diver named Eben Laden, who blacked out at 200 foot. But Deon had a deep passion for diving, and in his eyes, the dangers were worth it. On December 17, 1994, during the practice dive at Bushman's Hole, on the way back up, at 196 feet, Deon appeared to be fine and was seen exchanging hand signals with his buddy. The group continued ascending, but just a few feet further, at 164 foot, they noticed a light below them. The team leader did a quick head count and realized that they were missing one diver. The light below them was that missing diver, and it was DeAndrea. He was descending rapidly. The team leader initially tried to swim down to Deon, but after just a few moments he realized that this was a suicide chase and decided to turn back. No one knows for sure what killed Deon. The best guess is a deep water blackout from carbon dioxide buildup. 2 weeks after the accident, Deon's father, Theo, paid to bring in a small remotely operated sub to search for the body of his son. It found Deon's dive helmet on the floor of Bushman's Hole, but there was no sign of his body, and soon after they accepted that this would be Deon's final resting place. His mother and father placed a plaque on the wall above the entrance in memory of their son. 10 years later, in October 2004, cave diver Dave Shaw would arrive at Bushman's Hole, looking to do a deep dive. The 50-year-old Aussie was by no means an extremely experienced diver. In fact, this was a fairly newfound passion that Dave seemed to have picked up extremely quickly, skipping the shallow recreational dives and moving straight to deep underwater wrecks, and then quickly onto cave diving. David fell in love with it, and each time he would always look to push himself just a little bit further. Having a career as a pilot for most of his life, Dave possibly had the perfect, calm and collected mindset that would be ideal for stressful diving situations. Early that morning, Dave and his team geared up at the edge of the pool, and once everything was ready, they entered the water and began their descent. They used the shot line to guide themselves down, which is simply just a guideline from the surface to the bottom. 10 minutes into his dive, Dave started to look for the bottom. Darkness pressed in on him from all sides, and he directed his high-intensity light downward, hoping for a flash of rock or mud. He planned to bottom out Bushman's Hole at a depth that no rebreather had ever been taken. Then he would explore the bottom for just a few minutes. Shaw touched down on the cave's sloping bottom where the shot line ended, and he started swimming. There was no time to waste. Every minute he spent on the bottom would add more than an hour of decompression time on the way up. Yet Shaw felt remarkably relaxed, sweeping his light from left to right, reveling in the fact that he was the first human ever to lay line at this depth. Shaw stopped suddenly when his flashlight caught sight of something. Laying on its back, half submerged in the mud, was a body, with its arms reaching towards the surface. Shaw knew straight away that this was DeAndrea, the diver who had never been found. Shaw swam towards the body, and once up close he could see that the hands and head were skeletonized, but in general the body seemed to be intact. Shaw wrapped his arms around the body of Dion and tried to lift him up, but it didn't move. Shaw then knelt down next to the body and tried to pull it out, but it wouldn't budge. Dion's air tanks and battery pack were firmly lodged into the mud. Dave started panting from exhaustion and had to tell himself how stupid this was. He was 270 meters deep and working far too hard, and he was already a minute over his planned dive time. Shaw tied a line to the body so that it could be found again and headed back to the shot line to begin his ascent. While he was down there with the body, he felt an overwhelming connection with DeAndrea, and Dave knew that he would be going back to retrieve the body. 2 days later, he made a phone call to the parents of DeAndrea and promised them that he would get their son's body back. On January 8, 2005, after months of preparation and planning, Dave returned to Bushman's Hole to recover Dion's body. He was with a very competent group of divers and even a surface marshal who would be overseeing the dive. After gearing up, Dave climbed into the water and began his descent, and the crystal clear waters soon turned to darkness. He used the shot line to guide himself down while regularly checking his dive computer. It took Dave 17 minutes to reach the bottom, and once he did, he got to work right away. Dave was now jogging along the slope bottom of the cave, following the guideline to Dion's body. This is where the hard work begins, which naturally increases his breathing rate. Once Dave reached the body, he sees Dion's legs and starts to get the bag which he had brought with him to put the body inside. But Dion's body was no longer stuck in the mud, it was now loose, twisting and turning in the water, making the task extremely difficult. Dave's breathing got heavier and heavier during his battle to get the body in the bag. The line started to get tangled with not only Dion's body but also Dave's torch, and the whole operation started to turn into a complete nightmare. But Dave stayed focused and did what he could, but soon realised that he had run out of time and had to start his ascent. Dion was not in the bag, but there was nothing more that he could do. He turned away and began heading back for the shot line. But after just a few meters, he stopped. Something was holding him back. Dave had gotten tangled in the line and was towing behind him the entire body of Dion. He frantically tried to free himself of the line, but it was hard work, which caused Dave's breathing to turn extremely fast, until eventually Dave became completely incoherent, and then all movement would stop. Don Shirley was supposed to collect the body from Dave at 720 foot, but when Dave wasn't there at the right time, Don knew something was wrong. He could just about make out Dave's light below him, and he descended, hoping to help Dave with whatever has happened. But during his descent, Don's diving computer cracked and broke under the pressure. He could still see Dave's light, but without this crucial bit of gear there was nothing else Don could do apart from ascend. As he reached his decompression stop, he wrote an eerie message for the next diver who was going to meet him. The message was sent to the surface where everyone, including Dion's parents, heard the message, which simply read, "Dave not coming back." Dave was gone, and everyone knew it. When something goes wrong at this depth at that time, there's just no chance at all. But there were still support divers inside the cave that could need help. One of them was Don. During his decompression stops, Don became so disorientated he was unaware he was even on a dive. The only thing that saved his life was his grasp on the shot line. Don would surface 9 hours later after the worst decompression of his life and needed immediate medical care for decompression sickness. 5 days later, the team returned to Bushman's Cave to finish backing up. They said a prayer and sang a hymn to honour Dave, and then they began to retrieve the remaining oxygen tanks and line that was still in the cave. 2 divers entered the water and began pulling up all the line, but as they did this, something became free at the bottom and started to float up towards them. It was Dave Shaw, with DeAndrea attached to him. In the end, Dave Shaw had successfully brought Dion's body back to his parents, but it had cost him his life in the process. Thank you so much for watching, and if you did enjoy the video, please consider subscribing, as I'd love to reach 1k. But until the next true disaster, it's goodbye from me.